So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is finally here. It's been here for a few days now, and this game is absolutely massive. I'm only about 14 or 15 hours in so far, but it already feels like one of the biggest games that I've ever played, and with so much stuff to learn about and figure out. Today I wanted to go over 10 things I wish I knew earlier in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now the first one is to do with a really solid weapon you guys can get very early on, and this one is called the Sleek Saber. Now this is actually available at one of the very first vendors in the entire game. You can find this in Calm, which is essentially the first place that you're in once you get past the demo section of the game anyway. Now the Sleek Saber is available for 3,000 gil, which is actually not too much once you get further into the game and are able to quickly earn some gil. And this thing is absolutely amazing. It comes with a skill called Firebolt Blade. This skill does lightning and fire damage and also allows Cloud to enter aerial combat, so it's really solid against flying enemies as well. Now the thing that I wish I knew earlier is that you should not buy this sword. Do not buy this sword at the vendor. It is an absolute waste of money because you can actually get it in this purple chest at the swamp area early on in the game. You actually have to go right to this hut as part of the story. So you guys will have either already grabbed this and it's sitting in your inventory, or if you don't have this in your inventory and you are past this section of the game where you have to go and use the chocobos to cross that swamp, then there is a chance you missed it and you can still go back and grab it completely for free. It is the exact same one as the one in the store. So be sure to pick it up in this purple chest. If you're even remotely through the game, you'll know where this location is, simply because you do have to go there to progress the story. Now the next thing I wish I knew earlier was to make the most of the item transmuter. Now I was neglecting this very early on. I thought it would be kind of a waste to just craft items that I might not even need, but the item transmuter is going to be absolutely crucial later on in the game, so do not neglect this mechanic. The reason it's so handy is that the first time you craft any item, you'll gain what is called craftsmanship XP that levels up your ability to craft more items. Now obviously the higher the level, the better the items you can craft, and there are some really good things later on in the game, some of which are almost crucial to your survival when it comes to some of the harder boss fights and stuff like that. So anything that you haven't crafted yet, even if you don't really need it, it is worth crafting something for the first time just to get that XP, level up your craftsmanship, and then you will be able to craft some better items after that. Now the other reason this is also very handy is that you also can't hold more than 99 items of any kind, so you may as well craft things and kind of just get rid of those materials rather than hoarding them. Obviously you can sell them off as well, but like I said, if you haven't crafted something and you can gain some XP from it, then you may as well do so. Now the next thing I wish I knew earlier is actually a combo for Cloud. This is a really good combo to not only close some ground, but you can also enter aerial combat through this technique as well. So when you're playing as Cloud, if you just press circle, which is obviously to dodge, and then very quickly press and hold square, his sword will essentially send wind towards the enemy, and then he almost transports over to where that wind goes, and you can start attacking the enemy. So if it is a flying enemy, for example, and you do this, you will be launched up into the air, and then you can actually start attacking that enemy. It's also good on ground enemies as well. It will just close ground, so if you need to get closer and try and take someone out, if they're a ranged enemy or something like that, this is a very solid combo, and I definitely wish I knew this earlier, because I essentially thought Cloud was useless against flying enemies, so I would constantly switch to Barret or Aerith and try and take them out with those two characters instead, when I do much prefer playing as Cloud. So make the most of that combo. It is absolutely clutch, especially against those flying enemies. Now something else very handy to know is that you guys should not be neglecting the combat simulator. If you guys have met Chadley, which I'm sure at this point in the game you have, when you go and speak to Chadley, you can use his combat simulator, and initially I kind of thought this would just be some like practice arena where you can just kind of practice movesets and stuff like that, so I didn't think it was going to be that important. But the combat simulator actually gives you full XP so you can level up. You do also get rewards like materia and even summons, which are going to come in very clutch later in the game, and you get those from completing these different challenges. So this is not just a practice arena. You're not just like practicing movesets and practicing team combinations and stuff like that. You will gain XP for this stuff, you will gain materia, and when you do the harder challenges, you will gain summons. As you can see here, you can actually get the Phoenix summon, which this thing is absolutely crazy, and there are definitely more once you progress through the game as well. So do not neglect the combat simulator. This is honestly not only one of the best mechanics in the game, but honestly it is just a whole lot of fun as well. Now before we go any further, if you guys are enjoying the video so far, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications congratulations, there is plenty more Final Fantasy content on the way, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, something else I wish I knew early on is that you should pretty much be focusing on the main path early on instead of exploring. In most open world games, I love to just explore pretty much as soon as I can, but what I will say about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is that you should pretty much beeline the main path early on, as there's not really a whole lot to discover until maybe 7 or 8 hours in. It does open up a little bit once you've met Chadley, and even then it is still worth doing a little bit more of the main path before exploring too much. So trust me, I know that urge to just get into the open world and just run around exploring, but until you've actually opened up the game a little bit more, some of the stuff that you can do in terms of side quests and stuff like that, they're actually locked until just a little bit later on in the story. So focus on that main path early, and there will be a lot more sort of bang for your buck once you explore after maybe 10 to 12 hours. Now, early on, I did not understand the synergy abilities. I knew what they did, but I didn't really understand how they worked and how you could earn them. So I definitely wish I knew that sooner, because they are so much fun to use. Now, how these work, if you guys don't know, each time you use an ATB attack, that'll give you 1 ATB point towards your synergy attacks, which depending on the attack will usually need 2 or 3 ATB points per character. So you can't just main Cloud, for example, you do need to switch to your other characters and use their ATB attacks as well. And once you've done enough, you can then use those synergy attacks. So that is how that system works. I didn't really understand it, and I was always confused why it was grayed out. Maybe it explains it in the game, but I feel like it didn't really tell me. That being said, it may have told me in the demo a few weeks ago, and that's why I can't remember. But I thought that was worth mentioning because, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't really explain it that well in game. Now, something else that is worth knowing is that you should always be keeping an eye out for chests. This one sounds pretty obvious, and in a way it is. You should be looking for anything in an open world RPG type of game, of course. But the thing with these chests in this game is that they are often very well hidden, and there's been a lot of times when I've actually almost walked past them, even though I do tend to explore, you know, all the little nooks and crannies, and there's still a few that I almost missed, which actually had some really, really good items in them. So keep an eye out for those glowing chests. Usually the easiest way to identify them is just the glowing section of them. The actual chests themselves are pretty dark and they do blend in, but usually the gold and purple glowing section of the chest can stand out if you guys keep your eyes open for them. Now, luckily this hasn't happened to me, but this is something that I think a lot of people would wish they knew earlier, and this is that you should not be relying on autosave. I've seen a lot of people actually saying that they lost countless hours of progress because they assumed the game had autosaved when they got to a new area or a new chapter. So they kind of got to that section, they decided to get off and do something else. They closed the game, came back later, and they were about 2 hours behind where they actually were. Like I said, luckily this hasn't happened to me because I do generally just manually save in almost any game. So what you guys should be doing is manually saving every time you get off the game, and to be honest, probably after like every 30 or so minutes if you can remember. Realistically, the more often you save, the safer that is. So head to the menu, click that manual save option, and you will no doubt be thanking yourself later on. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard about the relationship system in this game, and it is obviously way more in depth than it was in Remake as well as the original Final Fantasy VII. And in order to gain better relationships with your party, you need to increase your affinity with the individual characters. They told us in the lead up to the game that there is a party level, and I essentially assumed that the party level just increased the affinity, but that is not the case. You do actually need to increase them individually. How you can increase that affinity is by doing side quests. Each side quest has a character that it's linked to. So as you can see with this one, it is linked to Aerith. And when I went and completed this side quest, that essentially just increased my affinity with Aerith. If you guys want to check your affinity with each character, all you do is press L1 and you can see everyone's affinity with you. The gray face is just what it starts out with. So those little gray emojis above their heads, that just means that I haven't increased my affinity with those characters. But as you can see, after I finished that mission, Aerith did have a different emoji above her compared to every other character. So that is how you increase your affinity. And this is really good for allowing for a bunch of different upgrades and even romance options and stuff like that later on. Now, last but not least, this is something that I definitely wish I knew earlier, and this is to do with the summon crystals. In the combat simulator that I mentioned before, you can do what are called summon entity challenges that allow you to unlock really, really strong summons that you can then call into battle yourself. Now, you can just try and take these on in the combat simulator, and they are definitely doable, but my goodness, are they hard. I did one against the Titan, and I actually put it on easy just to get it finished, it took me 14 minutes in the recording that I have to get it to about 2/3 health, and then I died. So if I had have gotten all the way to the end, it would have taken me around 45 minutes to actually beat that boss. That is a freaking long boss fight. So a way to get around this is that around the map you can see these sanctuaries that are all linked to these summons. For example, this one here is the Phoenix Sanctuary. All you need to do is just do the little puzzle that it gives you, which is generally super easy. Then you can head back to Chadley and the combat simulator, and if you have got one of those summon crystals, it will allow you to fight that entity in a much easier battle than normal. As you can see here, the more crystals that you have, the easier the fight will be. So if you can find multiple of these for each summon entity, then that is definitely worth doing. But even with one, it does make that boss fight a lot more bearable. So be sure to do these. The summons that you can get are absolutely insane. This Phoenix summon is so much fun to use, and they are absolutely worth doing, on top of the fact that it is just really fun to take these on in that combat simulator. So those are 10 things I wish I knew sooner in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Hopefully this helps you guys out. If it did, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications, and be sure to stay tuned as there is plenty more content on the way. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.